All right, y'all, let's talk about this. Love is Blind season 7. I'm going to give you a therapist's perspective on this debacle of a dating show. I binge watched it over the weekend and I was horrified by what I saw going on here. This is, to me, a twisted experiment to put people in pods, to get to know them behind the scenes. I think it's a good concept to say that we shouldn't look for looks, but it at the end of the day, it all boils down to the looks. As we saw with Nick and Hannah, that Nick said he was underwhelmed by her appearance. Hannah was also underwhelmed by his appearance, no matter how much they connected on the pods, which I didn't really feel a connection between Hannah and Nick. For whatever reason, they felt the connection, and when they saw each other in person, they were both underwhelmed. And that definitely showed up in their interactions after meeting in person. I just want to go over the couples and just give you my thoughts about what I observed from each couple. So we'll start with Marissa and Ramses. Who gonna tell her? Who gonna tell her about Ramses? Okay, so that's that with that. And you can even tell that with his friends, like when they had gotten to the point where they were about to get married and his friends came to pick out the tuxedo with him. It was apparent to me what was going on here. But I think from a therapist perspective, just looking at Ramses and how he suddenly backed out of it and his reasons for doing so. One, he's been married once before. So if you look at my series of Run for the Hills, that is definitely something to look at. Someone who is like a serial monogamous or someone who jumps from marriage to marriage or relationship to relationship, that's definitely what we would consider a yellow flag. The other thing is, I think Ramses has some either undiagnosed or maybe diagnosed mental illness. One thing that I notice about people who have pervasive mental illness, such as bipolar, schizophrenia, is something with their fingernails. I don't know what it is, but this is a commonality between people who have either bipolar, schizophrenia, not all, but some. But he has those clubbed fingernails. So, do you know, like when people have their nails kind of like go over the top of their finger and it kind of clubs over. I noticed a lot of people who have mental illness have those type of fingernails. And so I just noticed like a emotional instability in him. He's one indecisive, but he's also up and down with his moods and emotions. And so I think that he may have had some type of manic episode when he applied to be on the show and then he came down into a depression. There's something definitely off with his emotions, and I think that's what was kind of fueling the ending of their relationship. Marissa, she's young, she's beautiful, so that tells you that even though she is beautiful, her body is snatched, and there's nothing anybody can really say about her physically, that still doesn't make people stay in relationships with each other. It has to be deeper. So that's why I think this experiment, it can create a lot of trauma for people who are actually really looking for love. And the way that she was crying and the depth of the emotion that she felt when he pulled away from her, and then it happened on national television, that definitely has probably created some trauma in her that I would say she would need therapy for afterwards. And is it worth it? Is it worth it for somebody that you just met in 60 days? And because that process goes so fast, and they do a lot of trauma bonding in those pods. And I'm going to talk about that too. I saw a lot of trauma bonding in those pods. And once that trauma bond is made and sealed, it feels like the relationship is much deeper than it really is. And then it makes the breakup feel more traumatic than it really is. Because really, she dodged a bullet, if you ask me. Alexandra and Tim. Now, Tim, and because I'm a mental health professional, I'm just going to give it to from what I see. I'm not diagnosing anybody, but I've been doing this long enough to know behaviors And from what I see, he is definitely narcissistic. I do not know that he is a narcissist. That is something that he would have to be diagnosed as, but his personality style is definitely narcissistic. And if you go back to my Run for the Hills series, I believe it might be one or two or three where I mentioned men in the military. You know, if they have a career where they've been in the military, that is something to definitely consider. And I would say Run for the Hills. And it came out, you know, he expected servitude from her. He was very resentful that he had to wash the dishes. He has a very traditional mindset about how women should be. And I think that's something that he probably should have talked more about rather than trying to trauma bond with her, because he was a huge trauma bonder in those pods when he was telling her about his sister's death. He tried to make it seem like he was family oriented and that those deaths really impacted him, and maybe they have, but is that something that we really should be talking about when we're trying to get to know one another? And I feel like he used that as a way to pull her in emotionally and trauma bond her to him. The thing is that Alexandra, I think she's narcissistic too. So I think it did not really, it worked to a degree, but I think that she is very nonchalant, and she's not very emotionally connected to herself. Therefore, I didn't see, you know, a huge emotional connection to him, especially when he left. I don't know if y'all noticed, but when he was gathering his stuff, which is what narcissistic men typically do, and I can't speak for women because I don't date women, so I don't know what women do in relationships, but narcissistic men that I have experienced and that I have heard my clients experience, they love to create confusion and storm out of the house and feel like they're in control of the breakup. And he did that. He did that twice. He did that at in Cabo, and then he did that at the place that they were staying at together. He has a habit of creating confusion and then leaving, and emotionally disconnecting. And if you looked at his face when he told her, I don't ever have to see you again, that's where you'll see those dark eyes and that narcissistic smirk. He definitely had that when he told her that he don't ever want to see her again. And if you looked at her, she immediately went on her phone and started blocking him and deleting him from her social media pages and cell phone. So I definitely saw her doing that. So this did not affect her as much as he may have wanted it to. But I think it's because she also has some narcissistic tendencies as well. Okay, so Stephen and Monica. Monica has her stuff together. Like, she is not to be played with. She is no nonsense, and Stephen should have known better. Stephen is a electrician, which that's a nice field to be in, but you know, she's more of a corporate gal and he's a blue collar worker. And so I think the difference is she was trying to try something different, which is good. You know, it's always good to try something different, but definitely don't lower your standards. And it seems like he didn't even know about certain labels that she likes, and probably would have liked him to give her gifts. But that's her preference, and nothing's wrong with that. That is absolutely her preference. There are some men that are into labels as well. But she has her stuff together, and I can tell that she came from a pretty privileged background. Even when he started talking about like his upbringing, finances, and things like that, I just didn't think that he would be on her level. And I could just tell in the conversations that there were going to be some conflicts eventually. So I think she dodged a bullet. The fetishes and all that type of stuff, the text messages, once they got their phones back, you definitely see the confusion that the phones create in relationships. And I think that's another thing that we need to look at is technology and how that has created a lot of disconnect. It's supposed to bring people closer and give you more access to people, but actually it has done the opposite. So whoever that girl was that he was talking to, he should have been texting her while he was at this sleep study, but he didn't. He didn't communicate or really give her enough information for her to even feel secure that he was at a sleep study. So there was just a lot of breakdowns in communication. And I think when men don't feel like they are on a certain level with a woman, then they're going to find somebody that they believe is on their level or lesser to cheat with. And I think that was like the beginnings of that. Taylor and Garrett. All green flags. I just felt like, just from the beginning, it was no trauma bonding. He was not trying to evoke extreme emotion from her. They both have a scientific background, so they understand, they think in a similar pattern or way. They get each other. And I really liked seeing that with them. The incident where he had texted his ex girlfriend back, I think that he avoided telling her that he actually responded because he didn't want to get her upset. I think she is still wounded from her previous relationship where I think she says she's been cheated on before. So I hope that she gets some type of counseling and work through that, because I could see that becoming a barrier in their relationship. And if he's not clearly communicating to her what he's doing, I could see her becoming hell on wheels for him. But as far as like the reunion and the glow up and all of that, I like the way he looks here, actually. I'm not really feeling the new look that he had. I think he should just kind of like keep his astute look. I think, that's more fitting for him. Wasn't really feeling the new look. But I'm glad that they made it to the finish line. I think that they look great as a couple. I think they complement each other well. That was definitely a good match. The talk of the town, Ashley and Tyler. And Tyler is definitely narcissistic. Again, I'm not diagnosing anyone, okay? But I know a narcissistic person when I see one by their actions. And this is going to get her in a whole world of trouble. She's in a world of trouble. She knows it. But she's too prideful. She's not going to let the world know it, or she's still in Deluluville about him. This man had 3 children with a woman that came out online and said that they were in a relationship and had these 3 children together. Okay. So if she wants to say that she knows more than the internet, because what she's basically saying is that she knows more than the woman that came out and made that video. He's a liar. He's a liar. And she's going to find that out the minute that she has a baby by him. He's going to be gone with the wind. Okay. He's going to leave her the same way he left that other girl with them 3 children holding the bag. But why I think he's narcissistic, one, he was trauma bonding with her in the pods. That is their angle. I need y'all to understand that narcissistic people, the way that they get you locked in with them is to evoke strong emotion from you to bond them to you. But it's strong emotions that are either highs or lows, or they tell you a sob story to get you to cry. Once you cry, that's going to bond you to that person. But these people are using negative, like, stories, sob stories. They're not trauma bonding you with excitement or, positive things. They get you to feel sorry for them. And that's what he did when he was telling the stories in the pods and she was crying. Now, if you notice, the men were doing this to the women. Tim and Tyler, and I almost want to say Leo too. They took the angle of telling the sob stories. Now, the difference between Leo is that he's grandiose. Tim and Tyler are covert narcissistic men. Leo is grandiose. So it looks different. It looks completely different. They used getting into your emotions to get you bonded to them. And once they saw that they could get you to cry and get you to connect in that way, they saw that as a weakness, because narcissistic people think that crying and emotions is a weakness. So once they see that you have what they perceive to be a weakness, that's the one that they're like, okay, that's the one. They didn't pick based off of, who I like the most. They picked based off of who they felt like they could influence the most. When they were sitting on the couch and talking about when she found out about the 3 children, if you were to go back and look at that clip, and he had the hood on his head, which indicates deception. Because when people are deceptive, they'll pull their hat down, they'll put on a hoodie, they'll put their hands in their pockets, they're hiding their full true selves. But the one thing that I was looking at was his eyes. If you look at that clip, you will see the darkness that comes over his eyes. It's like a blank stare that he had in his face. And you could almost see the smirk on his mouth area. So that narcissistic smirk has definitely come out with him a couple of times, mainly when he has been pulled to the carpet. Narcissistic people are very emotionally unstable, and we saw that in Tim, Tyler, and Leo, because when Leo berated Hannah, when she was telling him what she had decided was that she wanted to go with Nick, and he hammered her. Like, he did not care that she was crying. He did not care that she was what she was talking about. All he was focused on was what he wanted. And that showed in how he responded to when she was crying. She couldn't even get her thoughts together. She couldn't even get a word out. He threw a complete temper tantrum. And that's what goes on behind closed doors with these narcissistic people. That's how they trauma bond you. That's how they get you hook, line, and sinker. So out of all of these, I would say Tim, Tyler, and Leo were the narcs, and Ramses has mental illness that's undiagnosed or maybe diagnosed. So there you have it. If you have any questions, comment below. I'd love to see your perspective on this.